administration. And we are joined now by an expert panel to break down these attacks. Waleed Phares is a Newsmax foreign policy analyst and author, and Ari Aramesh is a foreign policy analyst, both joining me now. Thanks so much. So, Waleed, I'll start with you. This attack striking a U.S. facility, Tower 22. It's believed the drone hit the base's living quarters while many were sleeping, which is why 3 are dead, nearly 35 injured now. Are these attacks typical of what we know about these Iranian-backed groups?
Oh, absolutely. It was even in the news, mainstream and non-mainstream, in English and other languages, that the Iranian-linked militias, should it be in Syria or the Hashd forces in Iraq, have been massing these launchers along the border with Iraq to Jordan, and then Syria to Jordan. And they have been talking about their efforts to remove U.S. forces on the ground. I mean, they have launched multiple attacks. We've reported on this many, many times. But this one was successful because probably of the reasons you have mentioned. I mean, this is not an area where U.S. troops are fighting, but resting or reorganizing. And this is something we have to take into consideration for the future. What would be the future measures?
Yeah, it's essentially a sucker punch. They struck while they were sleeping in their beds, in their living quarters. Ari, why are we seeing a rise in violence by these groups under this Biden administration? And what specific policies under Donald Trump's presidency kept them at bay?
The Islamic Republic of Iran understands one language, and that's a language of intimidation and force. When you deal with them from a position of strength, and when you deal with them on the other side of the table, letting them know that an action is going to be dealt with, not with just tit for tat, but with an overwhelming response, one to which they cannot respond, then they back off, they lay off, and they back down. We have made this mistake of letting the whole world know that we are leaving the Middle East. We can't. The Middle East is part of our foreign policy. What happens in the Middle East affects us right here in the United States. Yes, we can pivot to Asia, but we can also keep an eye on the Middle East. This idea that we're going to leave the region and we're going to leave it to its own demise, to its own device, has led to the rise and to had strengthened this Iranian regime that is looking to not just dominate the region, but its main goal is to expel, to kick out American forces from the region. Now, you hear some talking heads in Washington talk about how the war in Gaza has led to a rise in violence in the Middle East. The Iranian regime is using this as an excuse to exert more pressure on Americans. This has been their goal for 44 years. And again, you look at the Iranian strategy in the region is to exert as much pain on U.S. forces and U.S. allies for the U.S. to leave. Again, this has been a mistake, and the Biden administration never got the point. The point is this, and I'm a Democrat, by the way. I have voted for this administration. I have been quite happy with them about Ukraine. But when it comes to the Middle East and Iran, you cannot show weakness. And this is what happens. After 170 plus attacks on our men and women in the region, and we just, shoot down a fly, shoot down a drone, and shoot down a couple of missiles. We should have responded. We should have responded well. We haven't done it. And I don't know what goes on in that National Security Council at Foggy Bottom, but something's got to be done. And I hope the fact that the president's taken his time to make it, to actually respond to these heinous attacks, that means they are thinking about something a little more fundamental than just hitting a couple of Houthi drones.
Are you talking about something needing to be done, hitting Iran where it hurts? About 30 seconds left, Waleed. What do you think should be done?
Well, there are three opinions in Washington. One is to pack and leave. These are the isolationists, and actually I can see the fingerprint of Iranian influence here when we hear that point. And Ari was right in saying we have to be in the Middle East until our allies are capable on their own to stop the expansion of Iran. Another idea would be basically to maintain the status quo as long as we are negotiating with the Iran regime. The third one, take land from them. We have many allies on the ground. We should shut down the border between Iraq and Syria and then cut off Iranian advance towards the Mediterranean. If we have brains in Washington who are talking about geopolitics, that's the next step to do, in my view, modestly.
All right. We got to leave it there. Waleed, Ari, thank you guys so much for joining me this morning. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Much more right here on Wake Up America.